Welcome to a live edition of the BA Dynasty podcast. I am, of course, Geoff Pontes, one of the prospect writers here, joined by, I always go to the wrong side, Dylan White, our lead fantasy analyst. Dylan, welcome to the show as usual. Well, you're here, right? Why am I welcoming you?
Good question. No, thank you very much. I'm in the upstairs office. You look like you're in your bedroom. We're remote on location anytime. We'll just pick up and talk Dynasty, talk fantasy baseball anytime.
Yeah, we got a bunch of snow here on Tuesday, and kids didn't have school. We got like probably maybe 5 or 6 inches, really like wet snow. And you live in a place that gets snow, so you get it. It's kind of on that line where it's like not quite rain, but it's enough snow to accumulate. And it melted. Like the next day was like 40, 50 degrees, and it's just been melting like crazy. So my basement's been got a nice little river going through it. It's not like flooded, but we get some water. So I've just been vacuuming that and cleaning it up. So my office does not look presentable. So here I am sitting on my bed talking to you, a little bedside chat, a little bedside manner. But reason we're here, we're going to talk about a couple of things. I think we're going to open up with your tout team. We talked about my labor team last week. We'll talk about your tout team this week. I guess the week after that, we'll talk about my tout team. And we'll just talk about our teams forever. Hopefully not. But also the bigger news and the reason that we decided to do a live show is we released the BA Top 600 last week. It's a dynasty list. It's sort of the culmination of our position rankings that we've been doing. I thought the list came out great. We have to make some adjustments now that there's been some injuries, particularly Evan Diaz from last night. Unfortunately, it was a terrible incident. But Cade Cavalli as well, which is a pitcher I was super excited about. I know I had already drafted him in a couple of different leagues. I got to see Cavalli when I was down in Florida earlier. Outside of a home run, Jordan Walker had pitched really well. I think he struck out 5 of the other 6 batters that he faced. And it's been good this spring. Like he looked like he was set for a rotation spot. I thought for the draft price, it was a really upsidey play. That's all out the window now, as often happens. And we just got to turn our eyes to Hayden Wesneski as the breakout rookie of the year pitcher. Right? So that's kind of where I'm at. But Dylan, anything you want to touch on here before we jump into your tout team, and then we'll start taking some questions. You guys want to put them out there? We'll see everything over here on the side. I'll put some questions up on the screen, but we'll talk about your tout team first. I don't know if there, like I said, if there's any other stories or anything else you wanted to hit on quick before we jumped in on that.
No, just Jackson Jobe also injured, Andrew Painter, of course. So yeah, we're gonna have to do a quick update to the Dynasty 600. Hopefully, we can get to it next week, and then or maybe just before the season. But yeah, a lot of stuff, a lot of movement. Carlos Rodon, Edwin Diaz, like you said, is just nonstop kind of news and nonstop excitement in the WBC too. So can't.
I'm definitely one of those people that's in the. I guess it's the majority. Like I love that tournament, and I think like you saw, you see the passion, particularly like with you watch the Japanese team. If you watched any of the games in Taiwan, and when Team Taiwan was playing, like the excitement, just the environment was a blast. So I definitely enjoyed that quite a bit. It sucks the guys got hurt, and it impacts real life fan bases, real life teams, your fantasy team. I think we both have Edwin Diaz rostered in a few places. So it's unfortunate to see spent a whole lot of money and labor on Freddie Freeman, but that seems like it's probably more of a short-term thing. I guess Freddie Freeman's not going to steal 30 bases this year. But we'll see what happens with that. There's probably some more injuries coming too. But let's get into your tout team a little bit here. You were picking from, what was this, the 10 spot in the draft, correct?
Yes, picking for the 10 spots, a 12-team draft, roto. A couple things that are different from normal roto leagues is it's OBP instead of batting average, but also innings pitched instead of wins for the pitchers, and then saves plus holds instead of saves. And there's weekly fab. Last year, I believe Matt Truss from Razzball won. I was honored enough to be asked to join this year. A lot of returnees from last year: Alex Fast, Chris Clegg, Sarah Sanchez, a bunch of people from who were in it last year as well. So Yeah, tough room, of course. And because I was a newbie, I didn't get a choice of KDS, and I got stuck with the 10th spot, which I didn't really mind. I was in the 11th in TGFBI, so I kind of knew what to expect kind of in the back. And I don't mind it. But with a 12 team, it's a bit shallower, so it was a bit of a change of pace.
Yeah, the thing is, like, with those spots, I tend to like to pick at the back of the first round. Like, even in deep leagues, I do, because I'd rather have the early second round pick, because I feel like you're kind of getting like, that, like, doubling up on picks that are probably similar value in that range. So I tend to go late. Like, I know, like, when we did Highlander last year, like, I actually spent, in the invisible hand thing that they do, I spent a couple of keepers to get the last pick. And I ended up with Mookie and Corbin Burns, which, like, I'm happy with. There's no problem with that at all. Right? It's a good double up. I tend to think that that's a good position to draft from. So that being said, you went with Shohei Ohtani. Second pick was Garrett Cole. Talk to me a little bit about that. Now, is it daily? It's not daily rosters, right? So you can't move like Ohtani back and forth every day, right?
Well, so that's another thing too. So Otani actually is two different players, which I did
Oh,
not
he is
know
two different players.
when I
Awesome.
drafted him. I did not know that. So I picked him, and then they said, "Is he a hitter or pitcher?" And I didn't really even understand the question. So I have him as hitter only, and then a few rounds later, he was taken by someone else as pitcher only. So it's weekly. I believe it's the same as like TGFBI or NFBC, where it's the hitters are bi-weekly and the pitchers are weekly. I'm not totally sure. Wouldn't have changed any of my drafting strategy anyway. But yeah, I wasn't even sure who I would take. I knew I wanted Garrett Cole type, 200 innings because it's innings. Obviously, ERA and WHIP are in there too. So I wanted someone who's just going to accumulate a ton of innings. I even considered maybe Cole in the first round, and then another pitcher, like two back-to-back pocket aces. And then I decided to go Ohtani because I thought I could also put him as a pitcher if I needed the innings later. So that's what I did there. A bit of the way to prep that was interesting was because it's innings instead of wins, which is a very kind of unconventional format. There's no ADP that you can kind of go off of to see what the market feels like. So I draft kind of heavily on ADP versus value, like trying to find those inefficiencies. And so I kind of went in knowing that many of these people would just be taking the auction calculator and Fangraphs, typing in innings instead of wins, seeing what the dollars are, and they would kind of lean heavily on that with like the odd occasional, feel up or down for some of the players. But I knew that the ADP in quotes would be kind of what the values are from the auction calculator. So really all I did was I plotted out I did my version of the auction calculator like I do for any league. And I kind of had each position and I kind of separate them like visually, like $20 players here, and then $10 here and $9 right beside, so I could see the gaps in value. And I just kind of went off that because it was a 1 minute per pick draft as well. So I'm scrambling to cross names off and plug them in. And it's like, okay, here, and so I just really kind of picked where I saw big gaps. Like I take the last player in a tier before a big gap in any position. And I just kind of knew that by the end of, 20 rounds, 23 rounds, it would start to shake out where it all would kind of come together and aggregate in a good spot.
How do you like the innings versus wins and like quality starts? I think my preferred format is OBP versus average. So I like that. I do like saves holds versus saves. I like historically just do not like spending on closers. I want to go after good relievers with like high K per nine. Like that, to me, like that, when a league set up like that, like my 30 team set up like that, I've been in a few that have been save holds. I tend to perform better. I tend to perform better in OBP than I do in average because it's just how I think about hitting, how I think about relievers. Like the value to me of like, just the standard 5x5 thing isn't necessarily like my preferred format. I get it. I try to like adjust to it. Batting average is just so up and down where I think like OBP is a lot more predictable. Saves holds allows you to go after the best relievers, the lowest ratios, the guys are going to impact your team the most like that. And the guys get the most strikeouts. I mean, I think you can, and there's the other thing is it really devalues relievers, which I kind of like. It's just like later in the draft, you kind of go after the relievers that you like. Maybe you have a couple, like in a list of 20 names you want to go after, you end up at 2 or 3, and it's perfectly fine. Certainly, there's still more value for like the saves leaders, the elite guys, and Edwin Diaz, of course. Unfortunately, like not healthy, but going into a draft like this, he's still a guy that you want to target. How do you like the innings versus wins or quality starts? I think I kind of prefer quality starts versus wins, but I can see the value of innings.
I kind of like innings. I remember it was originally floated a couple years ago as a replacement for wins because people were at that time for some reason were anti-win, um, because it's so fluke. Or you'll get like with the follower now instead of like with the opener and the follower, that it's kind of, if you're the first person to come in, you've got the best chance of a win even if you don't go 5 innings, etc.
Yeah.
So I get it. I don't mind it. I kind of like the idea because there is probably a strong correlation between like the high innings starters and, who we think are good pitchers. Because if you're throwing that volume, obviously you're contributing to your team. So generally the ones who are throwing 200 innings, 150 plus innings are valuable and are putting up WAR for their team. So I don't mind it. It was a bit of a shift in my thinking because typically I like the good ratio pitchers who may only throw 120 innings, like sort of like the Andrew Heaney or Alex Woods. Those are guys I gravitate to yearly. And then I kind of had to break out of that mindset because, them being injured will actively hurt me. So that was a bit of a mind shift. But I don't mind it as much. I know that like quality starts is probably better than wins, but I mean, it too has its flaws. I know there's sort of an active debate too of like the definition of a quality start is actually not that great, and that they should make alterations to it the way they should make alterations to saves. The saves versus holds, I made an active decision to not go for any relievers. I have a strong faith in my ability to find a good reliever with good ratios in season. I don't want to pay, especially draft capital for someone like, I don't know, Hector Neris or something, when I know that there's going to be someone who breaks out and does better than Hector Neris in the season. Also with my valuations, people like Colin McHugh were worth the same as like Kenta Maeda or Zach Eflin. And I know no one's going to pick Colin McHugh in the draft, but people are going to take Zach Eflin and Kenta Maeda. So I just know that I will be able to find good ratio relievers who are going to get holds in season. So I spent basically nothing on them. I picked Andres Munoz, and that was for K9. That was for the ratios, and he'll get his saves and holds. And then I didn't pick one until the very last pick, like Alex Vecchio. I did take Liam Hendricks, actually. That was kind of like one of my sneaky stashes in case he comes back, and we're all hoping he does. But yeah, I didn't really pick any relievers at all, just for that reason I just talked about.
Yeah, and I think there's like you'll find out what roles are, and there's guys that are going to pop up. They're going to be like super replaceable. There are any players that, because it's OBP versus average, that you were more interested in? Like, I know that you took like Trent Grisham here, who obviously is better OBP guy than he is batting average wise. Kind of the same thing with like Matt Chapman, Willie Adames, kind of a similar story as well. Anybody that you sort of targeted that way? And like the other question I have is, had you known Ohtani wasn't a single player, would you have gone Freeman knowing the scoring?
I may have gone Freeman. I may have gone Vlad, actually. I had Vlad higher than Freeman going into the draft. I remember that. But I also knew that I was probably going to be short on stolen bases, and so I didn't really want to take Freeman or Vlad. And like I said, I was really aiming at pocket aces, and I thought Ohtani was kind of splitting the difference there, but I kind of get a half ace that I could use whenever I wanted, I thought. Yeah, in terms of OEP, my valuation spit them out where they're supposed to be. So like, Dalton Varsho and Alex Bregman, like these high OBP guys, higher OBP. Brian Reynolds kind of moved up. But then I also found by the end, because I kind of felt I was a bit behind on pitching from where I wanted to be, like I was getting sniped left, right, and center this whole draft. This room was a very sharp room. Anyone I was targeting after I make a pick, and then I hope this person comes back. They were never coming back. So I kind of felt a bit scrambly by the end. So I ended up getting these guys like Austin Hayes, Nick Castellanos, who are like high average, but like they don't really walk at all. So they're not really OBP guys. So I kind of felt that I was kind of settling for hitters by the end. Harrison Bader, people who are not like OBP machines at all. So yeah, it kind of threw me for a loop, but I just stuck with my valuations. I stuck with my approach of like, oh, there's going to be a gap after Matt Chapman to the next third baseman. So I'm going to take Matt Chapman here and give me time to think of like where I want to target next. So yeah, that was kind of the approach. And it turns out like Maze Copeland on Twitter he ran the draft through projections, his draft kick tool. And it turns out I ended up actually coming out in front using both ATC and Steamer using my approach, even though I kind of eschewed saves and holds. Like I crush innings and strikeouts because I didn't take saves and holds, and I guess my ratios are still good enough.
There you go.
So it worked out, I guess. I mean, that's what I like to come out of a draft with good projection, just because I know I kind of balanced and I'm like I have a well-rounded team, which is kind of my aim, and so I was happy about that.
It's also kind of like difficult to project out like save hold value for that particular category versus just like straight ahead saves, because you don't necessarily know. Like there's going to be weird guys that no one even would have thought about drafting that are going to be like top 20 relievers in that league. It's always what happens. So, as I always say with relievers, and I think this is like one of my like main tenets of my belief with fantasy. Not that I'm like wildly successful. I've won some leagues. I've done okay. I'm usually never bad, but like I tend to never invest in relievers. I think like if you're at a point with like a dynasty team, you want to trade for a closer in a saves league, go for it. But like initial startup drafts, drafts for redraft, if there's a fab component, I'm usually not putting a lot of a lot of stock into closers because those jobs change so quickly. They're just such high variance players, and like investing early in them is always tough. I think I did this week when I did my Earth League, but I did the same thing with like catchers. I kind of zigged from like my usual zag and took like 2 catchers in the first 6 rounds. Did stuff like that. But even then I was good. I think like I wasn't going to get Diaz, but I got sniped in a couple of different closers that I was kind of like, hot to grab. But yeah, I mean, you do what you got to do to get saves. And, ultimately I think that's why we play the game. So.
Yeah, I mean, I hate chasing something coming out of a draft, knowing that I need saves, knowing that I'll need stolen bases, and knowing that I have to find a streamable catcher at some point during the year. I hate that. That's how that's how my game has changed. So I actually took like Edwin Diaz in the second. I set them in TGFBI to take him specifically to avoid having to chase saves. I took like Will Smith, the catcher, in the 4th round because I wanted to like kind of hold down my catcher position. I took Sean Murphy. I think I set them in on him too in the 7th, so I didn't have to think about catcher for the rest of the draft. I didn't have to chase that. So I'm kind of feeling the pain, obviously, with Edwin Diaz now. But yeah, it all depends like on the dynamics of the draft. Is it fab? Is it OPP? What is it? And then like you decide your strategy, or I decide my strategy, and I kind of stick to it so that I don't feel pain later, or I try to minimize pain and tough decisions later.
Yeah, I just think it's like you're going to have to find something. I don't like to leave a draft with like no speed at all.
Right.
But like I tend to still want to lean like pretty heavy on like hitting. I want to have a loaded lineup. I think you want to have a couple of like good starters. You want to make sure that you get like a top 10 pitcher. Usually I go after like a top 5 guy. But after that, like I think you can kind of backfill pitching a little bit, and you're going to have to go to the waiver wire at some point. You're going to have to fab at some point. It's just the nature of the game, So if there's one thing I'm going to chase, it's going to be saves. And the other thing is it's a roto league, right? So that sort of helps as well, where you can go after and like max out certain categories and just be that much higher than everybody else. And if you find a Clay Holmes, somebody like that, like we had last year at breakouts, I remember like I had a team where like I traded for closers, and the guys I picked up off the waiver wire were the ones that gained me all the points in the save category. So it's like It's funny how that works sometimes. But that's enough about Tout. I don't know if there's any sort of closing thoughts you have here on the team. I think overall, as you said, it projects out really well. It's a Dylan White team, so of course it's going to perform well. I'm not shocked about that. You're also a good manager. So, any sort of closing thoughts with Tout, your first experience, whatever?
No, I just again, thanks to Jeff Erickson and the Toad team, all that, who to have me come aboard. I can't believe this room, how strong it was, and like in the middle of the draft, it was live drafted or live broadcast on Sirius XM, and they were like interviewing people live during the draft, and they're texting me, and I'm like, I can't right now, and like, I don't know, like I can barely keep it together as I'm crossing names off, and people are just like sitting there having interviews describing their picks and and all that. So I don't know how they do it. Hats off to them. But yeah, no, tough room. I'm really looking forward to competing with this group.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I think this is my fifth Tout year, because it was 19, 20, 21, 22, and now 2023. This is only my second time in 5 years, though, going to New York, because we haven't had the live drafts. So I'm in the head-to-head points league that drafts later on Sunday. So I'll be in New York City on Saturday. Going to go out with Gray and Harold Dieterle. I think he won season 1 at Top Chef. He's a chef there in New York City. I've been waiting to meet up with him for a few years now. So he's going to take us on a little food tour. We're going to get some Japanese cuisine. We're gonna toast the Japanese team. Hopefully, who I'll see in the WBC. I guess semi or final. I'm not sure if they'll be in the semi game that I'm going to end up seeing. I'm missing the one on Sunday just because I'm going to be in Tout. So I can't get down to Miami in an hour from. I don't have the Concorde to get down to Miami in an hour from from New York City. I always think about that when I'm on a plane. I'm like, why can't we have a plane that gets there in 45 minutes? Like, why do I have to be in this West Coast flight for 5 hours? But
you'll still get to catch Japan in the finals, so don't worry about that.
That's the hope, man. I'm not going to say too much, because I was saying the same thing about the Dominican Republic, and they did not make it out of the pool play. So fingers crossed. I'm really excited to see that team. I saw Yoshida hit a bomb today. We're personally invested in the success of Yoshida this year. It's like Chaim Bloom, Dylan, and then me, as we fought it out in our FYPD rankings with the rest of the staff, trying to get Yoshida ranked a little bit higher. So whatever, man. But anyway, that being said, top 600. We did all positional ranks. I think in total with the positional ranks, you ranked something like 780 players, somewhere around there. We cut it down to 600. I was on a podcast with Welsh for his annual bold prediction show earlier today. And I said, like, we cut it at 600 just because, and I know you kind of talked me off of like, I'm crazy. So I was like 1,000, 1,200. We'll rank everyone. We'll rank every player that ever played baseball. But like, you talked me off a little bit, like 600. And I think that there's a point where if you're in a dynasty startup league and you want to, after pick 600, if you want a major leaguer, you're kind of going to see who's in front of you and who's there, right? Like, and it's going to be slim pickings. And then, like, in terms of prospects, like, we ranked between our top 30s and then our, additional 31 plus players that we did. We got 1,231. That's an exact number. Ranking or reports on players on the site. We have tool grades on 900, as well as like OFPs, etc. So there is so much content on the site in terms of prospects that after pick 600, you want to go after prospects. We got plenty of it. And I think we're going to be able to, some things change over on the website with Baseball America sometime in April. We should have a new site coming live. You're going to be able to probably search like a list of 900 players plus. So, I personally think that we probably didn't need to go any deeper than that. It kind of, you get to a point where it's like similar value. Like, what do you like? What do you not like? Any sort of like overarching thoughts on the 600, the process, etc.
No, I like what you said about the 600. Once you get to that level, like if you're competing or you need a fifth outfield or whatever, like you're going to want someone like Chas McCormick. Whereas if you're rebuilding, you're going to want someone like Kyron Paris or someone like that. So like, we can't really say that Chas McCormick is better than Kyron Paris in a list. Like you're at that level now in the depth of the player pool where it's like you suit your needs. You got to pick the players that you need. If you need a catcher, you're gonna value a catcher there more than whatever, an outfielder. So at that point, we're just splitting hairs of like who is worth more than the other player. It's really all needs based. So I think 600 was a nice spot. In terms of the process, I think what I liked the best is basically like all the order of the players are also in the order they are in their positional rankings, and like pretty much. If you see where Gunnar Henderson is in the third base thing, you see where Gunnar Henderson is in the shortstop list, they kind of match up, and he's in the exact pocket that you'd want. So we went through that process. We have this master map of the 600 plus players we have, and it actually worked out really well. There are very few where it's like, I think maybe this person should be higher there, and we kind of blew it with the ranking. Like none of that really happened at all. So very happy with how it shook out. I kind of wish there were no injuries at all, because now having to move, Andrew Painter up or down, or Carlos Rodon up or down is now going to ruin the beautiful aesthetic that we've created in the Google sheet. That's a joke, partially. But no, I think it worked out really well. I like the list. It feels good to me. I play in a number of formats of dynasties, batting average that are shallower, keeper auctions with saves plus half holds. I've got 20 team OBP roto, and nothing like sticks out saying, well, that doesn't really apply to this particular format for me in the leagues I play in. So I like the way it felt. I haven't really heard anything bad about the list, any complaints. That we missed a couple in the transition. I think Jose Abreu fell off when we were transitioning from the positional rank to the master list, but like there were no things of like this person's like absolutely too high or absolutely too low that I've seen. So it seems like it's being received pretty well too.
Yeah, and I think that the other name that we had missed was Ramon Laureano, but it was just like transition some of that stuff. But the funny thing is, I feel like we had a lot of good inputs on this. So it was sort of like you had your list, I had my list. Like we maybe diverge in certain spots on like certain players, one guy here, one guy there. I don't think it's like wildly, off between the two of us. But our processes are a little bit different. You're much more projection based, numbers based. Not that I certainly look at numbers, I look at data. A lot of mine is, we obviously had scouting feedback, et cetera, that we just have from our reporting at Baseball America, which is an important component of what we do. But also like we kind of factored in, like we looked at what like Clegg's ADP mocks were for dynasties, and we looked at that. I think there were a couple other inputs too in terms of other rankings, et cetera, that we sort of looked at just to kind of bounce it against it. But I felt like looking at the ADP, because that gave us like some in the wild data point to kind of bounce our opinions and perspectives off of, was valuable. And then, obviously going into our rankings, is there anybody in particular that you kind of wish we ranked a little bit higher or would rank higher on your personal rankings? I think there's one that I'll probably guess off the top, but I'll let you say it.
I kind of wish I had put the guys on my team higher so that I could get extra trade value for them. No, I mean, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. When I was going through the list, again, it felt good to me. Like you said, like the Clegg ADP was a good validator that, we have these in good spots, because the market from his exercise seems to be reflective of what we're saying here as well. So the market's very smart. We're all kind of aligned generally. I think that's good. I don't tell me who your guy is that you think is too high or too low.
Oh no, I was figuring you're going to say you wish we ranked Jacob deGrom higher, because I know you have deGrom higher than I. Like I'm a little more scared in Dynasty in terms of like a 35-year-old with like a recent track record of some arm injuries, and like that's concerning. Of course, like I'll take the discount now. Like I got him in the third round in that Earth League. That's a redraft league. I'm kind of fine with that price point, frankly. Like a 15-team league in the third, okay. I get my couple of bats up front, and I got a guy that could potentially be like a legitimate ace if he throws 150 innings. Awesome, you know. Um, I wondered if you might think if you thought he might, if he should be a little bit higher than sort of like where we had him. We had him at 41 on the ranking.
Yeah, I think he should be higher. I personally would take him higher than that, but the market is a huge input into this too. If
Mhm.
if I think he's worth 20, but no one else in my league thinks he's 20, I'm not going to be able to trade him for what I think is actual value. So this is actually where you can exploit maybe inefficiencies and say, I trade for Jacob deGrom in any league if the market views him as 41. Everything you're saying makes complete sense. Obviously, he's an injury risk. Obviously, he's up there in age, and so any injury could be catastrophic and could be literally career-ending. But also, when he pitches, and I kind of talked about this in the pitching ranks, like even if he only throws 120 innings and you're backfilling with someone else as a replacement value, like he still ends up being worth like the eighth best pitcher or whatever it is. And then with aging curves, as long as he pitches for the next 3 years, in 3 years, his numbers are still going to be like a 3.5 ERA and a 1.2 whip at worst. And that's in 3 years. So you're getting 3 years of quality, hopefully quality pitching up until that point, and then you have that pitcher who is still a very valuable pitcher. That's why I think he's worth so much. Obviously, being the injury risk that applies to him, Byron Buxton, those types, rightly scare off your league mates, and you shouldn't be necessarily investing in these players. But I think just by pure numbers, I think he should be ranked higher than 41. But I have no problem with the ranking of 41 because it does make complete sense from the other side of the coin.
And that's my scaredy cat, like off balancing that one. The one that I'll say is Jordan Walker. Like, when we first started ranking these players, it was before like spring training had really kicked off. We kind of like at that point, I was still very on the fence about Walker making the team. I think we'll still see with that, but I maybe it's recency bias speaking here as well, but I think I would have Walker higher than 71. I think I would have him certainly within inside the top 50, probably within inside the top 40, and I think you could even make a case for like 30, considering Corbin Carroll's 29. We have Gunnar at 17 or 18. So that's one player that I think like the market probably has moved that value way up in the last couple of weeks. Like from when we created that third baseman list, which was initially where we had ranked at Walker. We have him in the outfielders as well, but his value has jumped tremendously in that period. Like just in terms of what you could get in a trade, and what the helium is right now, at least in the fantasy community with Walker. So I kind of wonder if Walker is sort of a guy that we probably could have pushed up or had a little bit higher. If he breaks camp, I would anticipate that in our first update, we'll probably have him a lot higher than 71. What are your thoughts on the Walker one?
I agree with everything you're saying there, but I don't think it's egregious that he's this low. Like I'm looking at that beautiful map I'm talking about, and like we have Arenado ahead of Paul Goldschmidt, Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert. Like these are stars who have demonstrated their ability for years. So, and I get that, some people may want to trade for Jordan Walker, trade Nolan Arenado for Jordan Walker, for sure. Luis Robert for Jordan Walker. Yeah, of course there are. But it's not terrible. I would not think that that's a vetoable trade in a dynasty league. If someone traded, Ozzie Albies for Jordan Walker, I would question it, but I don't think it's that egregious. So yeah, I think obviously he would probably be higher. I just traded Jordan Walker actually in a dynasty league. So it's a 15-team batting average league. I traded Jordan Walker and Vinny Pasquantino and a first-round FYPD next year for Bobby Witt Jr. I got to remember who it is. Bobby Witt Jr., Gabriel Moreno, I'm forgetting who else it is, but Bobby Witt Jr. was obviously the jewel of that trade. I can't remember who it was. And it was Bobby Witt Jr. was the jewel of the trade, but half of the people said, "Wow, I can't believe that you traded Jordan Walker," and then the other half were like, "Wow, I can't believe that person gave up so much for Jordan Walker." So again, it just talks about the dynamics of leagues, how valuations change depending on your context and your situation.
Well, and like those are like two of the highest helium guys, like Walker and Pasquantino right now. They're getting a ton of love, and as much as I like both players, I mean, like I was on Pasquantino real early because that was like the first year when I was at, the Prospects Live and was doing like a daily sheet every day. And like Pasquantino kept popping and like no one really knew who he was. And he got a hold of the data and was like, this guy's probably better than Nick Prado. And I remember like saying that a lot. And it was like a bit of a hot take because Prado was having like his best season as a professional as well at that point. It's kind of, teaming up with MJ Melendez and Bobby Witt. And, a guy that at that point had a lot of helium, where I think if you sort of like take a step back and you evaluate players, like at least in terms of what their contribution could be for your fantasy team and in the right now, you can profit a lot if you sell players at the right period. We'll see what happens with Walker. I think he's great. The height might be a little bit higher than maybe it should be, though I am the guy that's saying I would push him into the top 50. I don't think that's crazy. But I think there's probably some people who would rank Walker in the top 20 right now in Dynasty, frankly. I'm sure there's somebody out there that would do that.
Oh, and, for sure.
Pasquantino, I mean, we hear the arguments constantly if you follow anybody on Twitter of like Pasquantino about this first baseman versus this first baseman versus this first baseman. And, I think there's maybe a little bit more risk than some people maybe want to let on. Especially considering it's first base only, right? And like we'll see, but I think that getting Bobby Witt Jr., who is a universal top 10 player pretty much in like every fantasy format.
I looked it up who it was, who I'm forgetting. Andrew Vaughn and Spencer Torkelson.
That's a pretty big one. Yeah,
Vaughn. So it's not just Bobby Witt.
Well, the funny thing is like these are guys that over the last couple of years had that Jordan Walker helium. They get to the majors, maybe they don't necessarily fully meet the high-end expectation of like the 90th percentile outcome. And then they come back to earth a couple of years later and you're able to acquire those guys for a lot less. And that's the time to trade for players like that, especially if you believe in the skill set. And, I think with Torque, there's still some questions. They moved the fences in, will the power really play? I traded for him in a Dynasty league as well. I took him later in my Earth League draft. Just because I sort of believe that the power will come, everything else. By the way, if you have any questions, guys, put them in the comments. We'll be able to see them, pull them up. If not, that's okay too. We can chat. We're probably going to keep rolling here for another 5 or 6 minutes and then sort of wrap things up in a little quick podcast here. I guess I'm going to put you on the spot here. Anybody outside of our top 600 that you're a big fan of that we didn't rank? Like somebody that's maybe a little bit more off the radar. Maybe not.
Ooh. Right? This definitely did put me on the spot. You know who I like? Actually, that I think about it. Because I was trying to see what I could do to get him into the into the 600, but we had started with catchers. Leonardo Bernal on St. Louis.
Yeah.
Just digging in recently into the StatCast data and sort of my RoboScout stuff that I've been doing last year. He kept rising to the top, and I don't think you cover the Cardinals, so you know better than me on sort of like the pulse of the market on it. I just feel that he's highly underrated, Leonardo Bernal. I know that we just recently, I guess, he's in the top 30 for St. Louis. I can't remember where he is. He was a lot higher than I'd expected, which was good, nice for me to see. But Leonardo Bernal, since you put me on the spot, is the name that popped to mind.
I think the one for me is Marco Raya, right-hand pitcher from the Twins. It's just tough to rank these pitching prospects when, they haven't had a tremendous amount of innings. I think he's only had 65 innings. It all came last year at the low A level. I saw him early in the season and like he blew me away. It's a tremendous slider. Over a foot of sweep. He actually gets a little ride on it too, about 5-6 inches of ride. It's a really unique shape. can turn over a changeup. Pretty good curveball with like 2 plane depth in like the low 70s, 80s. It's really more of a slurve. And it's a good fastball. And he can, he'll sit 94 to 95 and run it up to 7. Probably can touch 8. He's pretty athletic. The numbers have been really good. Across 65 innings, it was, I think, 17 starts. Had a 199 batting average against. It was a 305 ERA, 108 WHIP. In terms of the K per 9 was like 10.5. Walks were a little bit over 3. Keeps the ball in the ballpark for the most part. He's really fun. He's still only 20. He was drafted really young back in that 2020 draft. He's somebody that I actually picked in my bold predictions with Welsh to break out this year and be a top 100 prospect by the end of the year. And I really do believe that if he has 100 innings under his belt, gets to Double-A, performs the way he does, he's a start. Like the stuff is there for sure. So he's somebody that I'm definitely excited about. I kept him in a couple of leagues. Somebody that I'll keep my watch list flags on. And, if he's coming out the gate hot and I have a guy that's maybe hurt or slumping, I might make a move for Marco Reyes. So he's one guy that I would have loved to fit on the back end of it. I don't know functionally if, a low-A pitching prospect that's had some health concerns already is necessarily like the best player to target though. So, kind of.
I like that call because I was looking at the Stuff Plus we have for the minors, and Raya has the same Stuff Plus on his slider as Dustin May, and a higher Stuff Plus on his 4-seamer as Dustin May. So
yeah,
it's a little bit of a sleeper, I guess, as you said.
As Tony La Russa would say, he's legit, brother. He's a Hall of Fame baseball guy, not quite yet, but yeah, and he's funny. He's one of these guys that like. I saw him last year. I posted the video when I was down in Dunedin, pitching against the Blue Jays back. It was actually it might have been the first night of the pitch clock. And he was one of these guys that was just like loving the timing and was just going right after hitters with it. And somebody texted me as an analyst with a major league team, was like, you saw a top 100 prospect tonight. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, that guy should be on top 100 list by the end of the year. Just ended up getting hurt. So I'm trying to, co-opt that prophecy and say it's going to be this year that he breaks it. It is good. But we've gone just about 45 minutes here. Sort of going to wrap up now. If there's any sort of final questions, people could throw them in there. I haven't seen any yet. So nothing to jump in on. Any closing thoughts on the top 600? Excuse me there.
No, like I said, I think it feels good to me. I like the way we balanced, near term with long term. We used data, we used scouting, we aggregated our opinions as well. And there was nothing egregious in any way, as far as I'm concerned. I used in that trade, the Bobby Witt trade, that of course I forgot that I also got Andrew Vaughn and Spencer Torkelson. I used our rankings to see like, what am I giving up here? Am I giving up too much? And definitely use it as a trading tool for those of you who are subscribers and are in dynasty leagues. Definitely use it to see like the valuations, because I think it's a very good gauge of what the sort of overarching value of each player is.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, it was just a very holistic sort of approach, and trying to get a bunch of different inputs, a bunch of different feedback, bounce. I know that we created lists and then sort of like question this against that and sort of looked at things. I mean, we didn't go like crazy with that. I think we kind of let some stuff sort of lie. But if anything was like wildly out of whack, we sort of went through, we marked it up and like had brief conversations about why and who. But I like Andrew Vaughn. Vaughn is like one of my guys. I think he's going to break out this year. So I'm sorry that you got my curse on players, because I've already gotten Freddie Freeman hurt and Cade Cavalli. So it's only a matter of time until. Oh, and Andrew Painter. I was also the guy that I'm like the UCL fairy. I go in and when people are sleeping, I say nice things about it and it just pops. I'm the cooler. It's like that William H. Macy movie. But all right, Dylan. Thank you, everybody that tuned in. Thank you for joining. We'll put this onto the stream as well, so you can listen to it in podcast form afterward. Appreciate it. All the subscribers that are out there, everybody that's been supporting sort of the first sort of voyage with full sort of BA fantasy. It's been a lot of fun, and we're going to have a lot more stuff coming up. And I think where we are most dangerous as a site is early in the season. We're getting feedback from scouts, we're getting data, we're getting information, and that stuff allows us to move really quickly on players, go back and look at some of our fab. And now we have Dylan, who's going to be able to measure all that stuff in a much more tangible way than I ever could. So I'm excited for that. Dylan, thanks again for tuning in, and thanks for
Anytime.
been around. We'll see you later, guys. Have a good night.